I also had to learn to let go of the performance-based mindset where you step into your ego in your head and kind of go, no, I need to perform to get all this content or all this artwork out so people can see me. And
Welcome back to the Better Than Best Academy, where we share stories of creative champions that will teach you how to become better, not only in your creative journey, but in every aspect of your life. And today's guest was born just outside of Toronto, and as you can guess, he's spent about 20 years with a hockey stick in his hand. An ex pro hockey player turned visual artist, he has quite the story for you today. His name is Michael Wills, and you were in for an extraordinary conversation with an extraordinary person. Now, let's dive in. All right, Mike. I'm really excited that we're getting to talk today.
yeah,
And let's explore. So, I want to do something a little different today on my podcast. Sometimes I'll interview the guests. I'll kind of introduce them a little bit. Some days I do some coaching on, with their permission, obviously. I'll
yeah,
do some coaching. But today I want to ask you this opening question. If What question do you have for me that if you had the answer, that question could change everything for you?
Ooh. What would it take to be successful as a content creator? Um, Not money wise, but I would say you're already financially stable, but then like your stuff's just out there like crazy amount and people know who you are and like they know your stuff. They keep watching it.
Man, I love that question. So, what would it take to be a successful content creator?
Yeah.
That's the question, but not relating to maybe dollars, but maybe
Yeah.
relating to influence and
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah.
I would say the number one thing, which I mean, I'm by no means super crazy successful in my content creating, but I would say that it would take time,
Yeah. Time.
time and effort. And it sounds so like, what do you mean? That's
Yeah.
obvious answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I look at it like Alex Hermosi. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff.
Oh no.
He's like a he's an entrepreneur. He's had like crazy success with like multiple. I think he makes like 100 million per multiple businesses. It's crazy,
Oh,
but
wow.
he's very content creator focused, and he
Yeah.
makes all this content. But the one big thing that he would always say is just volume and just really and it's kind of like the Gary Vee thought is like
Yeah.
volume and documenting. But I would say from my own perspective too, with both of those being very true,
Yeah.
I think at its core to be successful in content creating, it would be knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think that would be the biggest thing that I would think of because for me in my journey personally, I had to really learn who I was before
Yeah.
I could be creative and before I didn't feel burnt out anymore. Because I think I saw you post something about that as like the artist struggle and like you go through these pits of burnout. And I can definitely attest to that. It's so easy for us to get burnt out when we are doing the things that don't fulfill us.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we do the things we don't fulfill us because and I like to always look at it like what's two layers deep. So
For
like
sure.
what got us there to doing these things that we don't want to do that don't fulfill us, and normally it's because we kind of lose sight of who we are.
Yeah.
And that would be the biggest answer to that question. Man, I love opening with that idea and that thought. What's your take on it? What do you think would take?
I kind of agree with you. You actually kind of have to know yourself a little bit and kind of discover, but still film it along the way of the discovery. And as soon as you explore like who you are without any confines of like what society tells you in the sense of like you need to get a girlfriend and then a wife and then a house and go to college, like what about if it's not that way and you actually discover who you are in a different way and find out that through a growth process and through growing pains and all this like experimental stuff, that's when you actually truly find yourself. And then you kind of go, oh, this is what I would love to do in my, in my heart. And and go with that, right? It's and then like hence when once you find yourself, then that's when you're truly happy. It's tit for tat that way, and then you walk into who you're called to be in a sense of like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do in life, and then it just starts to unfold, right? Like it's just like almost that let go and like let it flow kind of thing where let's see what the world has for you in a sense of like you were supposed to be this person. No, you're going to transition to this because this is what you're truly supposed to be. So yeah, I say, like you said, time and all this discovery of who you are to get to that point, and then uh move into actually who you're supposed to be is quite the thing. So yeah.
I love it. So for
Yeah.
those that are going to listen to this later, those that may not know that who you are and what you do,
Yeah.
your name's Mike. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself in a little bit. From my knowledge, though, I know that you're a super talented visual artist, and your work is really cool. So I'll definitely want people to check out your work. But more
Yeah.
so than that, I'm just curious, kind of like what's been going on in your life since we've last talked? Because I know it's been what? It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been what, since 8 months,
I think
something like
so, yeah.
that. Yeah. So what was happening with me is I was transitioning out of hockey and then trying to discover who I was. It's kind of in that process of like I'm almost like 4 or 5 years out of hockey now and coming into a visual art kind of art kind of background that I've always had, but now it's come to my as a profession. I just discovered that I had to move to a city to find myself and get all these side jobs to make my passion, thrive. And it was almost like God was just cutting everything down to a point where I had a job in March, April, June, and I had to leave it because the doors were closing. I wasn't getting paid. Things were just like it was almost like the laws of the universe were just like closing the doors. So I had to step out into faith and do this art thing alone. And I've always wanted a safety net. I've always wanted security of like money, finances, a job to make my passion go. And it's almost like God was saying, like, we have to do this now, and like we're shutting everything down. So you have to do it. Like, and you have to feel that like the free fall of the unknown. So that's kind of where I was at throughout this summer. But I also had to learn to let go of the performance based mindset, where you step into your ego when in your head and kind of go, no, I need to perform to get all this content or all this artwork out so people can see me. And he was actually deprogramming me in the sense of like, no, man, you just have to be Mike and just be okay with being Mike. And then those things will start to flow effortlessly. But you have to get to that point. And it was a huge struggle for me actually, like to actually not know like my identity through performance, whether it was hockey based or artist. Um, and so I really had to like sit down and rest and actually heal some of my wounds. And throughout the summer, like the amount of times I screamed in my apartment here and cried and all this like healing journey, it was incredible because you actually had to face yourself and those demons and those dark places you didn't want to find in your heart, and you actually had to like heal all the past traumas and stuff. So that was my journey throughout the summer, and I met a lot of people throughout along the way as well, especially like you and a couple others. And then I simply like one of them came to Toronto because they were friends with one of my friends, and we kind of hit it off. And then I went out there to Alberta, and I visited the mountains, and I had all this new discovery and this new zest for life because this healing process was just like you're alone, you're talking to nobody, and you're just isolated to like, hey, you're meeting people throughout the along the way, and then like you get this cool trip at the end, like it was kind of crazy. So, and that's where I'm at is still sitting with the void of like the unknownness of like what's going to happen with me. So, what an adventure it's been the last year. Would I change anything? I changed some parts, but I probably wouldn't have healed as quickly if I didn't get through those things. So, yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of where I
That,
am, and I get to create beautiful paintings along the process. And
I love it.
I had a art exhibition as well in the fall, just to talk about this process of the dark night of the soul and what I've gone through to get to this point of healing. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Man,
Yeah,
that's so cool. And even just talking to you this little bit,
yeah,
like 8 months later, I can already tell just your spirit and your energy is different from that first conversation we had so long
thanks.
ago. So that's awesome. That's awesome to see. I'm glad to see that you're in a much better
Yeah,
place mentally, spiritually, physically, I'm sure.
yeah.
One thing you mentioned, I would love to hear what was the biggest insight, the biggest takeaway that you've gotten so far on this journey.
Biggest takeaway. I would have to say it was funny because I kept having this dream, and I would have like deja vu moments, and then the dream actually came true. Uh, where I was out in Alberta, and I saw what I needed to see through this dream that I had, and I met the guy, the actual guy in my dream. And I was like, "Holy
Oh,
crap! You're the guy. You're supposed to tell me something," and he never did. He never
oh
told me.
no.
But what I got from it was, don't forget where you came from, and that was
Good.
pretty much uh, the whole kind of the sense of what God of this universe is. It was telling us is like, or telling me anyways, like, don't forget where you came from, and because if I'm gonna level you up into the next level, you have to remember your origin of like like your blue collarness of where you came from a small town. So that guy was the epitome, right? Like muddy boots, like ripped jeans with oil on them, like uh, uh a blue a jean jacket and this like really like worn out hat, and he was like just this weathered face, and he's just this nicest guy, and I was like, that's what it is. Like I can't all what I was trying to do throughout my life is trying to like leave that place to discover more and to explore this world. And it was almost like, don't forget your roots, like where you came from, because that will be your humbleness to move forward in life and to find greater things. So that was a really cool like process right at the end of this dark night of the soul that I was going through. So yeah, it was a trying season because like you said, my energy was low. I didn't know what was happening. My life was still up in the air, and it's kind of fun, but it's like now I kind of remember who I am, and before I forgot who I was. So yeah,
So
yeah,
good. So
yeah,
good. One thing I always find interesting is you mentioned God and faith, and that's a huge part
yeah,
of what we talk about here. I'm not going
yeah,
to shy away from my faith.
yeah,
I'm definitely unapologetic there. I mean, I'm not going to push it down anybody's throat,
yeah,
but I'm going to talk about what I believe in. And
yeah,
one thing I always find interesting is God talks to each of us uniquely.
yeah,
And it's like, even like he came to you in a dream. And
yeah,
then that dream was prophetic in the sense of you saw the guy from your dream.
yeah,
And instead of it being like words from that person. It
Yeah.
was the visual of him, and even having to see it in person.
Yeah.
You were able to understand what that meant visually,
Yeah.
and just like you articulated it there through word, is
Yeah.
like remembering your roots,
Yeah.
remembering where you came from, remembering your origin story, and that is so huge, and that speaks volumes to who we are as creative people, because it's
Mhm.
like you said, especially because we identify as creatives, it's
Yeah.
so easy for us to fall into that performance trap. Like I did
Yeah.
it all of my life. I can remember when I was like in elementary school and I was like the lead. It was like the Piano Man. It was this super silly like musical. And I remember like I felt like I was the man because I'm there performing and people are watching me. And even to when I had my rap career and God leading me to a space of putting that down and that whole journey of understanding that like it's not about what we do, it's about who we are.
Right.
And it's who we are is what's going to create the art. As what's going to connect us to humanity. Because I mean, we could be the most amazing at our craft. We could be the most amazing at our abilities, but I don't know if you've ever heard, for my sake, it's like a really perfect classical song, and
Yeah.
it's like it's so perfect and it sounds so good and they're probably super technical, but even like watching, or maybe like watching an orchestra to a degree, and
Yeah.
it's like they're amazing, don't get me wrong, but it's almost like it's missing this level of humanity.
Mhm.
And I feel like our life in general and
Yeah.
the experiences of who we are, that's what brings the humanity into our art.
Yeah.
And I think the most beautiful art is the art that brings that. And I think that's so cool that you mentioned that. But to circle back to another thing you mentioned this idea of, so the present day, you're still kind of battling with this sense of unknown, and my son just turned off one of my lights. So
No,
that's cool.
no.
Thank you. Thank you. He turned it back on. But you're dealing with this sense of like the unknown. Could you maybe elaborate a little more how that feels?
Yeah. It's scary yet exciting, to know that you have this unknownness, like you can't see in front of your face, like the hand in front of your face, and you're like, well, if this is just God's way of teaching me something, then I just need to sit with it and sit with the feeling because like everything's gone to crap in my world that I think has gone to crap. Not necessarily what someone else's perspective is, right? Like I like everything was almost like kiboshed when I was trying to hang on to something and look back when he's trying to push me forward. And so he had to like break everything. So I have to like swim to the deep end almost, right? So I'm in this unknownness of like what's going to happen next. And it, I it talks in the Bible like don't worry about your clothes or the food that you eat, like just worry about the present day, right? Which I'm trying to learn is like learn to be in the present moment, not look to the future and have a panic attack of how is this going to work out, right? And so each day I just take it for what it is. And if my highest is resting, then I have to rest. If my highest is painting 4 paintings that day or whatever comes out, like that's what it is. And like, I've been battling just getting over a cold now. And it's like I needed to rest for those like 7 to 8 days or whatever it was. And I just couldn't do anything. And my mind was panicking going I need to do something, and my body just was like no, we need to rest. So learning to be comfortable of doing nothing in the unknown is even scarier because that could be your highest at that time. And it's not performance based, it's not like egoic, it's not laziness, it's just what you need at that time. And people have a tough time doing that because our world shows us that we need to have a 9 to 5 job and we can only take one sick day off, not five, what we really need. And but yeah, it's this unknown of like I could go home and consider myself like that's it. I'm done in Toronto, or he could give me $1 million tomorrow, like who knows what's gonna happen. It's gonna be one of those like exciting times where it's like I everything's kiboshed. I don't know where my money's gonna come in rent wise. Like everything's at my door, like the wolf's at the door, and yet something beautiful will happen. So that's the exciting thing with being like having faith is it's all gonna work out. You just don't know how it's gonna work out or when. So
Very good. I
yeah,
love that. Yeah, because it's even a test of faith. It's like we have to have a certain level of faith, even the smallest faith. But
yeah,
once we do, it's like you said, it's like we're in the deep end.
yeah,
And we're like we're in the deep end and it's pitch black.
yeah,
We don't know what the next step is. All we
yeah,
just kind of got to do is tread water and
yeah,
stay afloat. And then, sure enough, before we realize it, it's like, whoa, where did this whole new reality come from?
yeah.
And I would like to ask you, so you said that rest is obviously so important for us as creatives, and again, so hard for us as creatives. What do you think is one reason why we don't like we have such trouble with resting?
I think because we're always trying to make the next best thing. Or our mind is always constantly like working and thinking. How can we do this or how can we do that? Where I wish, and it's funny because I will sit there and do mundane things and just rest on my couch, but my mind's thinking of how to create this certain process in a painting. So I'm still working, but it's always in my mind. It's not actually like physically working. And so that's where it like is taxing on your body because your mind's constantly pumping out thoughts. And you kind of go, okay, what about if we did this stroke and we manipulated it here, we use this kind of texture, whatever it is. And so same with content creators or musicians, like they're always like, "Oh crap." And then it's not inspiration that hits, it's actually like the process of like you actually figured it out. And it's like that line needs to go with that line, right? That certain emotion needs to go with this certain emotion to make this acting like what it is. And so we get this like huge like epiphany going, oh wow, that's what it is now. And so it doesn't matter if it's 3 in the morning, 5 p.m., 11 o'clock at night, that's when it hits. So that's why we have a tough time resting. And I believe if you're in an artist block or some sort of writer's block or something like that, the best thing to do is get away from it and just rest,
That's
right? You can still think about it once in a while, but like just the some of the best coaches told me if nothing's working in hockey, get away from the rink. Like
exactly.
your worst enemy. Like if you keep pushing yourself into it, get away, enjoy a coffee, sit down, write something, go out, see some nature, do other things, and then come back. So, resting doesn't have to be a form of like sleeping on the couch or sleeping in your
Exactly.
bed. Resting could be, meditation in nature or prayer. Like it's all these different rest points. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you said there. That whole idea of, and I look at it too, is it's what's tough about rest is it's either gonna find us, and I heard this quote. It was like rest will find us in either delight or discipline.
Yes.
Meaning, if we choose to schedule rest,
Yeah.
it'll get done.
Yeah.
But if we get into a space of never resting, we'll be
Yeah.
burnt out.
Yeah.
Physically, our body, like sometimes I feel like we get sick sometimes because our body's like, listen, you
Yeah.
haven't slowed down. When's the last time you ate? When's
Yeah.
the last time you slept?
Yeah.
And I also love the fact that you said that rest doesn't always look like being lazy or sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
Rest looks like something that's going to recharge you. And
Yeah.
that would be my one practical tip for the people that may be listening at home that are wondering,
Right.
Where do I start when it comes to resting and getting away? Try something that's creative but completely out of your realm of like
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
Like if you're a musician, try painting. If you're a
Yeah.
painter, try music or writing or whatever it means. Or even like you said, going out into nature.
Not a yoga person, but I would go just to stretch and
For
feel
sure.
something different, right? It's a new experience. It's a new form of art of like you get to move your body and enjoy it that way. And it's like, whoa, like this is new. People are actually saying be kind to yourself, right? Be kind to yourself in a sense of like if you need rest, take the time. Where working out is like you have to do the emotion to get the result, where they say in the yoga practice is like if you're hurting just sit down and rest, and you're like that's a new thing, I have no idea what
Oh,
that
wow.
means, you know? So and it's pretty cool because during everyone else's, they call it a practice, um you're everyone else is doing the stretching, whatever, and you're just laying there and just in your present moment. Like that's just you doing your thing. Like that's a form of rest in like a in another venue, even. So which is cool to me. Um, where high performance athletes don't get that sometimes, and that's all I've learned. But I've also had the creative side of like you're panicking because you want to make great art, so you can't rest. So learning the confines of the balance of like, hey, you need to do this to recharge, to keep going, like nature's a huge thing, man. Like just to walk in a trail or like an like just find some water, go find a stream or bubbling brook and just hear the sounds, like that will recharge you. So it's it's all a divine setup. Like
Yeah.
what we've had to walk out in this life is like a divine setback for a divine setup. So those those things that didn't work out almost like catapulted you back to what you're doing now, right? To make you, because your knowledge and your expansion goes, oh, I know what I did in the past. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to move forward in a better way. So yeah,
For sure.
it, yeah,
And I heard it said once, your next is connected to your now.
yeah,
And I also look that as the same as your past is connected to your now. And
yeah,
it's like what we've learned along the way. And I love asking, so you have this background in sports,
yeah,
which I do too. I played baseball most of my life.
yeah,
And I love to ask the question for those that have had that success in the realm of sports that are also creative.
yeah,
What have you learned from your success in your career in hockey that you're
yeah,
able to apply to your creative career today?
yeah. Uh, I would have to say the professionalism, and the connections to people. I would say performance, but God completely kiboshed that whole thing this season for me, which was hilarious. Because I thought performance, you put out X amount of time with X amount of like product, you'd get X amount of uh opportunities or work or something like that. And she's pretty much flipped it on me, so it's just kind of funny this season. So but I would have to say the professionalism, like if you're gonna make good art, make it great and put your best foot forward in that to make a piece that's like that's worthy of standing out. Where hockey was, or like athletic was the same way. You have to put in your professionalism. Like if you're going to be an athlete, you know make sure you have the mindset of a professional athlete, eating healthy, sleeping right, taking care of your body, stretching, performing at a high level that way. And where if you would take that and grain it into a professional, whether it's art you're a banker, or you have all these cool unique jobs, interior designer, yada yada yada, you're still acting as that professional person. But you're just you, right? You're not the actual identity of that, but you're like you in the professionalism walking that out. So that's what it has taught me through athleticism, and also connecting with people, right? You're not higher than anyone
Yeah,
else.
for sure.
Uh, just because you play a sport and people are looking up to you as fans doesn't mean you're, like higher than them. You're just a person to person kind of connecting with them in a situation. And you never know to make new connections too. Like I've met so many people throughout my life that have given me opportunities, or just be like, hey, why don't you come to our house just for a dinner, and just like almost like love on you that way. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to ask you, let's see. My notes got a little crazy
Yeah,
for a
no
second
worries.
there. But yeah, and I love that. And I love the fact that, like I was saying, that idea of our now is connected to our next, and
Yeah.
how our past is also connected to our
Yeah.
current,
Yeah.
our present.
Yeah.
I love that idea because it's a lot of times we get so caught up in the doing
Yeah.
that we forget to be present in the now.
Yeah.
And it's in the current moment we're in that's really
Yeah.
going to speak to us in a way that we may miss if we're always focused on what's next.
Yeah.
But also, with that said, I like to think of legacy
Yeah.
and the legacy we want to live. So I'd
Mhm.
love to ask you the question, what is the legacy you want to leave in the world?
Ooh. I would love to leave an impact on people. Whether my goal is to speak in front of thousands, and to tell my story, and to tell uh what I've gone through, and but also that legacy would leave an impact. And then they see the art and go, because of all that pain he went through and all those trials, that's what the beauty of it came out as. And um, when I pass on, like, this art will still be here, right? It will be a remembrance of what I've tried to do on this earth, was to make an impact, to just make someone smile or look inside their heart going, wow, that I'm moved by that. Like you know or if they cry or release some sort of emotion to heal their trauma, like that's what I want to leave. Because most people, if you see like some of the best paintings in the world, it's like Starry Night, or like the Mona Lisa, you're moved by these paintings. But it's what they brought to it, right? If you know their story, they were mostly starving, they were mostly like going through torment and all these different trials, and you can resonate that within your own heart, going, yeah, I've been through some trying times or crappy times in my life. I understand why they painted those paintings or made that music. Like, we can all resonate with Eminem, like all the hardship that he's had, and he's created this like empire of music that nobody can touch him. And it's like, wow, what an impact he's made on people, even though some of his music's like kind of warped, but he's kept people alive because they've written him letters going, man, you've kept me alive because of your music, right? You were so
Yeah,
courageous to make an impact that way. That So no wonder he has like faithful millions of fans, because
sure.
like what an impact he's made on their human experience here. So
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of he's unapologetically himself.
exactly.
I
Exactly.
think that's the, and even more so in our current space and time. I
Yeah.
feel like it's so hard for us as people to be ourselves.
Yeah.
because we get so worried about being canceled.
Yeah.
We get so worried about being politically correct,
Yeah.
and it's almost like we've gotten afraid of the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is important. And like the Bible says, the truth will set you free. But
Yeah.
another thing I feel like that does get kind of misconceptualized in that point is a lot of times when you think about the truth, you speak the truth from love. And
Yeah.
I think a big portion of how we package ourselves and the
Yeah.
things we believe comes back to how are we saying it? Because
Yeah.
it's less about like what we say. It's like the quote that says people will remember how you made them feel more than what you said.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge is I always try to think of myself, how can I make someone feel loved? How can I make someone feel valuable and seen?
Yeah.
And then the truth that comes with it can be packaged in a much better way. But with that said, so you say that so that's the legacy you want to leave. You want to
Yeah.
leave that impact.
Yeah.
How can you leave that big impact on the planet?
I would say almost kind of like what you said, right? It was just is seeing somebody for who they are, like, and to love them and just to be seen because that's what people want. Like, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be loved and go, "Oh, you noticed me?" Like, out of everybody else, like, you noticed me in a crowd, and it's like, yeah, like, all you need to do is just and I think that's where we miss the mark in this separation of this world, that we're so focused and ingrained on cancel culture or ourselves that we miss connecting with people and going, "You are loved, you are, appreciated." And someone goes, "Oh my goodness, like I had no idea," like that's where I think people would level up and a cohesiveness of love and connecting more. So that's how I would do it is if I had a room full of people, I'd probably talk to each individual person until the night's over, like because they came to see me speak or make a lesson or do whatever or just I would take my individual time and go, you're appreciated too. Thank you for coming and thank you for, like being you. Because you have no idea how much of an impact you can make just by saying hi to somebody or smiling or brightening up someone's day by talking to them. Like, yeah, the thoughts in their mind, they could be like, "Oh, like I'm ready to kill myself today,"
Yeah.
and you somehow just was like, "Hey, man, how's it going? Like, you're in this coffee shop too, like that's pretty cool. Like, what's your name? Blah blah blah," and you're like, "Holy crap, someone noticed me," you know?
Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
With that, I love to ask this next question. Who are the three most influential people in your life and how have they impacted you?
Whoa. The three most influential people. I don't even know if I have three. I have to think about that one. Obviously, like I think like my parents would be one, just because they're very impactful that way of teaching me what I needed to be taught at a stage and in what my dad has taught me in honor and humbleness and all this stuff. I have a mentor, Daniel. He's taught me a new way of thinking and a new way of appreciating life. Um, it's very, it's almost like this new zest for God, where I was feeling like I was fading away from that faith and that uncertainty of life, and he he rewired my brain in such a way of like it's all good, like it, let it go. And so he's been a huge impact on my life as well, to get me to a certain point of just loving yourself. And the third one, there's actually another mentor I've always dealt with. His name's Daniel as well. He's just kind of, it's funny, they're both named Daniel. They're they've just like kind of did what I talked about, was just sit there and love on you and just appreciate who you were, and just say the things that you needed to hear, and talk to you going, you're a real person, I just appreciate you, and that's all it is. So like, just because they heard you out, um they're very impactful people in my life, just to show you love and connection, and to to encourage you, and to keep going in art, in the sense like, not even art, just in this life, like keep breathing. So they've made a huge impact that way, to be like, hey man, you're just you, and that's all you need to be. So just keep loving yourself that way. So it's, yeah, I'd say those three people would have been in my life for quite a bit, a long time. So yeah.
I love it. That's so good.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to hear you say it that way,
Yeah.
because it's so important to think of those that have really helped us stay in life. Not
Yeah.
even just art, not even just what we do, but those
Yeah.
people in our life that are going to hold the space and
Yeah.
encourage us when we need it the most.
Yeah. Like, you, like 8 months ago, when you just met me through social media, you were like, hey man, let's hop on a call, and just, you encouraged me to like keep going too. Cause I felt like my life was not over, but just like I couldn't see anything in front of me. Like I had no hope, like, and so even that part, like just knowing you quickly, it just like impacted my life, going, hey dude, I see you, I know you're in a rough state, but you are loved, and keep going, because it's going to happen for you. Like, you just have to like get through the healing
For
process of.
sure.
Yeah.
I want to flip it on you now.
Yeah.
So, if you could be that for someone in this moment right now, if you could say one bit of advice or encouragement to someone that's maybe like a younger you. So,
Yeah.
think of you 8 months ago.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person today, right now?
I'd say the pain that you're suffering now will pass, and it will all be okay. um and just because you're trying to beat yourself up for something doesn't mean you're a terrible person. So don't beat yourself up, because in 2 weeks it's not gonna matter to you as much, um, or a week, or anything like that. Like, no matter what you do, you still are like a part of me, and I'm a part of you, kind of thing. So don't beat yourself up on the things that weren't your fault, and through this pain, like, just keep going, just keep healing, just keep breathing. That's all you need to do. And it's funny, because I've actually had a friend uh, through a process like this, and I was helping him through a part, even though I was going through a dark time as well. But he was many years before me, but he's kind of still in it. And now, I'm get to be a groomsman at his wedding, kind of thing. So it's funny how like
So
life
cool.
plays out. So he's just like, yeah, man, like, I want you to stand up there with me, because you kept me alive at some dark times. And you know, we're brothers in hockey. So he's like, you I'm happy to, for you to stand up there with me. I was like, yeah, man, that's cool. Like, so, but yeah, I would just say in those words, just keep going, just keep healing, just keep breathing, and just be kind to yourself.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, is there any questions that I missed?
No, no, I think, like, if that would be it, like, I'm just trying to think, like, yeah, that's mainly what we wanted to talk about,
For
like, what
sure.
what would you say, like, impacted you to keep going in content creating? Like, you went from rap to now
Yeah.
this, like, it's been a
Man,
huge
I would say
uh,
it's like you said, a little bit of like when you mentioned you're in a guy's wedding that you helped while you were still in the
Yeah,
middle of nonsense. Because there was plenty of times this past year that I was just like,
yeah,
I'm seeing no results. You know, you
yeah,
get you hit the walls. It happens. But instead of getting into depression and seeing the
yeah,
anxiety that I might have had a couple years ago,
yeah,
I looked at it, who can I serve today? And that was always like my thought is like, who can I serve? Who
yeah,
can I help? And
yeah,
when I thought about it that way and I got the lens off of my problems
yeah,
and thought about how can I encourage, how can I inspire someone else,
yeah,
that really became a big driving force for me to keep going. And
yeah,
even to this day, anytime that I start getting low, I'm like, all right, how can I help somebody today? Even more
yeah,
so that I already would try to do.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That,
that's great.
that's a very mature way of looking at things, of going, screw my problems. How can I help somebody else? You know,
For
like,
sure, because it's this crazy thought, and like I really attest this to the community and the local church that I'm a part of,
yeah,
because it's this really idea of if you can devote yourself to helping those around you, all of
yeah,
a sudden the problems that you're facing seem
yeah,
so insignificant. Because
yeah,
I've helped some people and heard some stories, and it's
yeah.
just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
more, more. You want more show? It's about to start. I love the sweet interruptions. I used to be so upset by them. You want to say hi again?
Hey,
Oh,
yeah,
Dodo,
you
yeah.
know so?
Oh, you're disappearing into the green screen. You want to say hi, Dodo? Yes. All right, bud. Let's go watch your show. Just a little bit longer,
That's
buddy.
awesome.
But yeah, and I would say it definitely comes from being a part of that community because
Yeah,
they've just helped me see in such a new light. If you're when you're able to help people, it
yeah,
just you for whatever crazy reason it is,
yeah,
your problems seem to melt away. But that
yeah,
would be one big thing that I've taken away from that. But with all that said, today's conversation, I love to wrap up with this final question is what was the biggest insight you got from our conversation today?
yeah. The biggest insight would be how you said, like, we don't need to do anything, we just need to be ourselves, and how you looked at it as, if you're even in the hole a little bit, how to serve somebody else and how to help them out, but also, like, you don't need to perform or do anything that way, you just need to be you, and how your journey um is like expanding, and you're like, you need to find yourself first in order to make those uh that content, and define that way. So that was cool, because I usually thought in a different way of going, you need to make all this stuff to find yourself to do it. You're like, no, you need to find yourself first and then make all this. So that was really cool to me. That was, you know, to see a different
Yeah,
perspective that way in life.
for sure.
So, yeah.
I love
So
it, man. So good.
yeah,
So
but
good.